They pulled me aside, voices low, eyes serious. The kind of serious that's supposed to make you small, supposed to make you recalculate, reconsider, retreat. They gave me one warning. One. And it carried weight. It carried consequence. It carried the kind of pressure that's designed to rearrange your priorities on the spot. And I stood there, quiet, still, listening. But here's the thing nobody in that room understood. The thing I couldn't explain without sounding like I'd lost my mind. The only thought moving through me in that moment was her. Not the warning, not the outcome, not what I stood to lose. Her. And maybe that terrifies you. Maybe that sounds reckless. Or maybe, just maybe, somewhere beneath everything you've been told about strength and strategy and keeping your head clear under pressure, you already know exactly what I mean. Because there are moments in life when the world tries to hand you fear, and something deeper inside you hands it right back. Not out of arrogance, out of love, out of a loyalty so quiet, so certain, it doesn't need to announce itself. That's what this is about. What it means to choose someone, not when it's easy, but when everything around you says don't. There's a kind of love that doesn't ask permission. It doesn't check the weather before it commits. It doesn't run the numbers or wait for the right moment or ask whether the timing makes sense. It just decides, quietly, completely, the way a root decides to go deeper into the earth before the storm arrives. Not because it knows what's coming, because it knows what it's holding. I didn't always understand that. I used to think love was something you fell into, stumbled upon, half surprised, half terrified, something that happened to you. And in the beginning, maybe it is. Maybe the early part is all accident and electricity and the feeling of someone rearranging the furniture inside your chest without asking. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what comes after the electricity, after the newness settles, after life, real life, starts pressing in from every direction with its demands and its deadlines and its warnings. I'm talking about the moment when love stops being a feeling and starts being a decision. A daily, deliberate, sometimes difficult decision to stand where you said you would stand. That's what nobody tells you at the beginning. They show you the romance. They show you the spark. They show you two people finding each other across a crowded room like the universe arranged it just for them. And they stop the story right there, at the peak, at the warmth. Because what comes next is harder to package. What comes next requires a different kind of courage. Not the courage of beginning, but the courage of staying. And staying, real staying, is tested, always. That's not pessimism. That's just the architecture of a meaningful life. Anything worth protecting gets tested. Any structure worth trusting gets stress applied before it gets trusted. Love is no different. The question isn't whether pressure will come. The question is whether you know in the deepest, quietest part of yourself what you're standing for when it does. I know what I'm standing for. Let me be honest with you for a second. There are rooms in my life that feel like storms. Rooms where the pressure is real, where the voices carry authority, where the consequences of choosing wrong ripple outward in ways I can't fully control. I'm not immune to that pressure. I feel it. I've felt it press against my chest like weather, like something building on the horizon you can't stop but can't ignore. And in those rooms, in those moments, I've learned something about myself that no achievement ever taught me. I've learned what I reach for when everything else falls away. And it isn't the result. It isn't the outcome. It isn't even the version of myself I worked so hard to build. What I reach for, what moves through me like a quiet current beneath all the noise, is the image of her, the thought of her, the weight of what I carry when I carry her name in my chest without saying it out loud. That's not weakness. I want you to hear me say that clearly. That is not weakness. That is the most clarifying thing I have ever felt. Because when you know who you're fighting for, you stop being afraid of the fight. Here's what I've come to understand about protective devotion, and I mean real devotion, not the performative kind, not the kind that only shows up when it's convenient or when someone is watching. Real devotion is structural. It holds shape, under load. It doesn't collapse when conditions change. It's the kind of love that says, Whatever this costs, I'm not leaving her unprotected. Not physically, not emotionally, not in the space where I could have stood and chose to sit down instead. Think about a candle, small, quiet flame, doing nothing but existing, burning, giving light. And then think about a storm, real wind, the kind that doesn't care about small, quiet things. The storm isn't personal. It doesn't know the candle. It doesn't hate it. But it will extinguish it without a second thought just by moving through. And now think about what it means to stand between that storm and that candle. Not to stop the wind, you can't stop the wind, but to absorb it, to redirect it, to let your body, your presence, your willingness to stand in an uncomfortable place be the thing that keeps the light alive.
What it feels like.
That's the only metaphor that fits what I feel when I think about her, inside the rooms where pressure lives. But here's what nobody told me, and this is the part that surprised me most. Standing between the storm and the candle doesn't feel heroic. It doesn't feel dramatic or cinematic or righteous. It feels quiet. It feels like the most natural thing in the world. Like gravity. Like you were always going to end up here, in this exact position, absorbing this exact pressure for this exact person. And the strangest peace moves through you. Not because the storm isn't real, because your reason for standing is. Psychologists call this kind of clarity value alignment under stress. When who you are and what you love are pointed in the same direction, even difficult moments carry a sense of coherence. You don't fragment. You don't splinter into anxiety and second-guessing and desperate calculation. You become strangely, almost unnervingly still. And that stillness is powerful. That stillness is what allows you to think clearly when everyone around you is reacting. That stillness is love doing its deepest work. I'm not asking you to be reckless. I'm not telling you to ignore consequences or throw yourself into fire for the romance of it. That's not what this is. This is about knowing, with the kind of knowing that lives below thought, below strategy, below the version of yourself that performs competence for the world. Knowing who belongs at the center of your choices. Knowing who gets to live inside your most important moments, not as an afterthought, but as the organizing principle.
She was my organizing principle.
And when they gave me that warning, when the voices got low, and the stakes got real, and the pressure moved into the room like weather, I didn't freeze. I didn't fragment. I got still. And in that stillness, I found something I want you to find too. The understanding that fear and love cannot occupy the same space with equal authority. One of them wins, and you choose which one. I chose. I always choose. Not because I'm fearless, I'm not, but because her absence from the center of my choices, even for a moment, even under pressure, even when the room says otherwise, would cost me something I can't recover. And I've done the math on that. I've run every version of the calculation. The world offers many things worth protecting. Status, security, reputation, progress. But there is only one thing in my life, that if I lost it through cowardice, not through circumstance, but through cowardice, through choosing fear over love, in the moment it mattered most, I would never fully return from. Only one. And she doesn't even know she's that thing. That's the most human part of all of this. That the person who holds the most gravity in your life often has no idea of the weight they carry. She goes about her day, quiet, alive, full of her own complexity, while somewhere inside you, she is the compass, unappointed, unhesitating, true north. I stood in that room with the warning echoing around me, and I thought about her voice, the specific texture of it when she doesn't know anyone's listening. And I knew exactly what I was going to do. Loyalty is one of the most misunderstood words in the human vocabulary. People treat it like a contract, like something you sign at the beginning and then check periodically to make sure the other person is still honoring their end. Like it's transactional, like it's conditional, like it has a clause somewhere in the fine print that says, this commitment is valid only under favorable conditions. But that's not loyalty. That's convenience wearing loyalty's name. Real loyalty, the kind I'm talking about, the kind that actually costs something, doesn't live in the good seasons. It doesn't prove itself in the easy rooms, in the calm conversations, in the mornings when everything is working and everyone is warm and the future looks bright and manageable. Real loyalty is a creature of pressure. It only fully reveals itself when the conditions are wrong, when the room is cold, when the voices are serious, when the easier choice is standing right there, waiting, dressed up as wisdom. I've watched people confuse self-preservation with intelligence their entire lives. I understand it. I've felt that pull myself, the pull toward the path that costs less, risks less, protects more of what you've already built. That pull is not irrational. It's human. It's deeply, honestly human. But here's the problem. Every time you follow that pull at the expense of someone you love, every time you choose your comfort over their dignity, your safety over their security, your reputation over their need, you make a withdrawal from the deepest account you own. And that account doesn't have unlimited funds. There's a concept in psychology called attachment security. The idea that the people who love us most aren't just loving us for today, they're building an internal model of who we are. Every interaction deposits into that model. Every moment of presence, every act of courage on their behalf. Every time you stayed when leaving was easier, it all accumulates. And when pressure comes, when life applies its real stress to the structure of your relationship, that accumulated security is what holds. That's what keeps the architecture standing when the wind gets serious. But here's what the textbooks don't quite capture. It's not just their security you're building, it's your own. Every time you choose loyalty under pressure, you're also telling yourself something. You're reinforcing something about who you are that no external achievement can replicate. You're becoming the person who does not break when breaking would be understandable. And that version of yourself, that quiet, unannounced, pressure-tested version, is the one you'll actually want to be when you look back. Look at me for a second. I'm not talking about martyrdom. I'm not talking about self-erasure or disappearing yourself into someone else's story. I'm talking about something far more sophisticated than that. I'm talking about the mature, intelligent, eyes-open decision to place another person's emotional safety at the level of genuine priority, not sentiment, not performance, priority, and then building your choices around that placement. That requires self-knowledge. It requires honesty about what matters, and it requires the courage to let what matters actually matter, even when the world is watching. Because the world will watch, and the world will have opinions. The world always does. There will be people who look at your loyalty and call it weakness, who watch you absorb pressure quietly, who watch you redirect the storm without announcing it, and interpret your stillness as passivity, your devotion as dependency, your choice to protect someone as some failure of ambition or self-worth. Let them. Let them build their analysis from the outside with the information they have access to, which is never the full picture. They don't know what you know. They don't feel what you feel when she's near. They don't understand that what looks like sacrifice from the outside sometimes feels like the only thing that makes complete sense from within. There's a kind of strength that doesn't perform itself. It doesn't need the crowd. It doesn't adjust its behavior based on who's observing. It moves through the world doing what it does, holding what it holds, protecting what it protects, without requiring validation from people who don't understand it anyway. That's the strength I'm after. Not the celebrated kind, the functional kind. The kind that's still standing long after the applause has moved on to someone else. And that strength, I want to be honest with you here, that strength is hard to find without love, without the specific gravitational pull of someone who makes the cost of courage feel worthwhile. I've watched driven people, brilliant, capable, relentlessly ambitious people, slowly hollow out from the inside because they optimized for everything except connection. They built systems. They built results. They built reputations that entered rooms before they did. And yet in the quiet, in the still hours when performance wasn't required, there was nothing. No anchor, no warmth, no one who held them to something deeper than their next achievement. I'm not willing to be that person. And here's something I've never said out loud quite like this. I'm more afraid of becoming emotionally untethered than I am of failing publicly. More afraid of arriving somewhere significant and being hollow inside it than I am of the warning or the pressure or the consequence of choosing her in a room that wanted me to choose differently. Success without someone to come home to isn't success. It's a very well-decorated form of alone. She changed the geometry of my ambition. That's the only way I know how to say it. Before her, before the specific weight of caring about her specifically, Not love in the abstract. Not a concept, but her. This woman, this particular and irreducible human being. My motivation was pointed outward. Build, expand, achieve, produce. All motion, all forward, all external. And then something shifted. Something I didn't plan for and wouldn't reverse if I could. The motion started pointing somewhere new. Not away from ambition. I want to be clear about that, but through it. Like ambition became the vehicle rather than the destination. Like everything I was working toward suddenly had a face. And when your work has a face, when your effort can look someone in the eyes, it changes the quality of the effort entirely. It changes the endurance you have access to. It changes what you're willing to move through, stand in, absorb, survive. Don't tell me that's not practical. Don't tell me that love is soft currency in a hard world. I'll tell you what I've learned. The people who endure longest aren't the ones with the most willpower. They're the ones with the most meaning. And meaning, real meaning, the kind that holds its shape under pressure, almost always has someone's name attached to it. A face, a voice, a presence that turns abstract ambition into something personal enough to bleed for. Under pressure, everything reveals itself. Your real values surface. Your actual priorities emerge. The things you told yourself mattered suddenly separate from the things that actually do. And in that moment of separation, in that clearing, you find out exactly who you are. I found out I was hers. Not in a diminished way. Not in a lost way. In the fullest, most clarified way I've ever experienced myself. Like pressure didn't break me, it focused me. Like the warning, instead of scattering my priorities, gathered them into a single, coherent point. Her, every time. Without apology, without hesitation, without the need to explain it to anyone who hasn't felt it. Because the ones who have felt it, the ones who know what it means to find something worth standing in front of the storm for, they already understand. They don't need the explanation. They just nod. Presence is the most underrated form of love. Not presence as in physical proximity. Not just being in the same room, breathing the same air, occupying the same square footage of a shared life. I mean real presence. The kind where you're actually there. Where your attention isn't split across 17 invisible concerns. Where the person in front of you isn't competing with the noise inside your head and losing. That kind of presence. The kind that costs something in a world designed to fracture your focus into 1,000 competing directions simultaneously. We live in an age that rewards distraction, that monetizes half attention, that has engineered entire systems around the idea that your awareness should always be partially elsewhere, on the next thing, the better option, the update you haven't checked yet. And I'm not innocent of that. I've sat across from people I love and been 1,000 miles away inside my own calculations. I've nodded at the right moments, said the right things, maintained the appearance of presence while my mind was somewhere it considered more urgent. And I'll tell you what that costs. Not in dramatic terms, in quiet ones. It costs trust. Slowly, nearly invisibly, it costs trust. Because the people who love us are more perceptive than we give them credit for. They feel the difference between being seen and being tolerated, between being heard and being processed, between the person who is here, genuinely, fully here, and the person who is technically in the room while emotionally checked out. They feel it, and they file it somewhere. Not always consciously, not always with language attached, but it accumulates. And one day the account is lower than you realized, and you don't know exactly when the withdrawal started. I started paying attention to my attention. That sounds simple. It isn't. Paying attention to your attention means catching the moments when you're drifting and choosing to come back. Not because someone asked you to, not because you got caught, but because you decided that she, her words, her silence, the specific quality of what she's trying to share with you, deserves the version of you that is actually present. That is an act of will. A daily, repeated, sometimes difficult act of will. And it is, I would argue, one of the most loving things a person can offer someone. Not the grand gesture, not the sweeping declaration, not the moment everyone witnesses, the quiet Tuesday afternoon when you put down everything that was pulling at you and simply looked at her like she was the most important thing in the room. Because she was. Because she always is. Here's what nobody talks about in the psychology of love, and they should, because this changes everything. Presence is not just about the other person. It is the most direct path to your own depth. When you genuinely show up for someone, when you slow down enough to actually receive who they are in real time, you access parts of yourself that productivity and ambition simply cannot reach. You become more human, more whole, more capable of the kind of emotional intelligence that actually sustains a life, sustains a relationship, sustains the kind of inner architecture that holds up under real pressure. Distraction is a surface life. Presence is how you go deep. And I chose deep. I choose it every time I remember to, and I forgive myself the times I forget and come back sooner than I used to. That's growth. Not perfection, I want to be clear about that. Growth. The slow, unglamorous, non-linear process of becoming someone whose love is reliable, not because it's effortless, but because it's practiced. But here's what hit me hardest. The realization that stopped me mid-thought one ordinary afternoon and rearranged something fundamental inside me. She doesn't need me to be extraordinary for her. She needs me to be present with her. Those are not the same thing. Extraordinary is a performance. Presence is an offering. Extraordinary says, look at what I've built. Presence says, I see you, right now, exactly as you are. And I'm not going anywhere. I had spent so much energy learning to be impressive. And she was quietly asking for something so much simpler, something so much more difficult. Let me tell you about a specific kind of silence. The silence that exists between two people who genuinely trust each other. Not the silence of nothing to say, but the silence of nothing needing to be said. Where you can exist in the same space, in the same quiet, and feel the warmth of being known without any performance required. That silence is one of the most intimate things human beings can experience together. And it is only available to people who have built enough presence, enough consistent, genuine, showing up presence, that the relationship doesn't need constant reassurance to feel secure. That silence is what I'm working toward, what I'm building toward, one present moment at a time. Because here's the truth about trust, and this is the part I want you to sit with. Trust isn't built in the big moments, it's built in the small ones. In the 10-second decision to put your phone down when she starts talking. In the moment you notice she seems quiet, and you ask, not performatively but genuinely, what's moving through her. In the times you remember the small things she mentioned weeks ago, because you were actually listening. In the consistency that doesn't require an audience. Trust is assembled from 1,000 ordinary moments of choosing to be there. And when it's assembled, when it's real and solid and tested, it becomes the foundation on which everything else stands. Including the hard moments, including the rooms with warnings, including the pressure that comes, for every person who dares to build something meaningful. You can only stand steady in those moments if the ground beneath you is real, and the ground, the actual ground, is made of presence, of accumulated showing up, of the love that didn't wait for perfect conditions to be love. I think about the candle again, the small, quiet flame doing nothing but being what it is. And I think, maybe that's what she is to me. Not fragile, I don't mean that. She is not fragile, but she is precious in the original sense of the word, having value that is not negotiable, not relative, not dependent on what the market decides today. Precious the way certain things are, simply precious because they exist, because they give light, because the world is specifically better with them in it. And my presence, my full, undivided, unhurried presence, is the thing that stands between her and the indifference of a world that moves too fast to notice what it's losing. I don't take that lightly. I've never taken it lightly. There is a version of love that shows up only for the highlights, that rises for the celebrations, the milestones, the moments worth photographing. And then there is the version that shows up for the Wednesday, for the tired evening, for the moment when she doesn't have anything impressive to offer, and neither do you, and you're just two people sitting in the ordinary reality of a shared life, and you look at her, and something in you goes quiet and certain and grateful. That's the version I want. That's the version I'm choosing. Not because it's easier. It isn't. But because it's real. And real, honest to God, unperformed, unglamorous real, is the only thing I've ever found that actually holds. She makes me want to hold. And so I do. Every day. In every room. In every moment where presence is possible, I choose it. not perfectly, but faithfully. And faithful is the word I'll always return to. Growth is a word people attach to achievements, to milestones, to the measurable distance between who you were and who you've become on paper, the titles, the progress, the visible evidence of a life moving forward. And I understand that. I've chased that version of growth. I've tracked it, measured it, used it as proof that I was becoming something. But there is another kind of growth. Quieter, less photogenic, harder to quantify, and impossible to fake. And it doesn't come from ambition alone. It comes from love. Specifically, from the particular and demanding work of loving someone well over time. She grew me in ways I didn't see coming. Not by demanding it, not by issuing a curriculum or presenting me with a self-improvement plan, but by being who she is, fully, consistently, without apology, and letting the friction of genuine closeness do what friction does. Reveal things, sand down the rough places, expose the parts of you that still need work, not because someone told you they did, but because love holds up a mirror that achievement never will. I had blind spots I didn't know were blind spots. I had patterns, automatic, habitual, deep-grooved patterns of thinking and responding that I'd never examined, because nothing in my life had ever required me to. Success doesn't ask you to examine your patterns. It just rewards the ones that work and ignores the rest. But love, intimate, close, consistent love, doesn't let you ignore the rest. The rest shows up at inconvenient times, in conversations you didn't plan for, in moments when you respond in a way that surprises even you, and then you have to sit with what that means. I've had to sit with a lot of what that means. And here's the thing about that sitting. The uncomfortable, humbling, growth-producing sitting, it's some of the most valuable time I've ever spent. More valuable than the hours I've logged optimizing systems or sharpening skills or preparing for rooms where I needed to perform at my best. Because what I found in that sitting wasn't failure. It was information. About myself, about what I was carrying, about the places where my emotional intelligence had gaps that my intellectual intelligence had learned to paper over so effectively, I'd stopped noticing the seams. She found the seams, not cruelly, not deliberately, just by being close enough, and real enough, and present enough that the seams became visible. And instead of walking away from that visibility, instead of retreating to the version of myself that was easier to maintain from a comfortable distance, I chose to stay in the discomfort, to look at what was being shown, to ask the harder question, what would I have to change to be worthy of this? That question changed me more than any goal I'd ever set. Here's something the self-growth industry rarely tells you, and I want to say this carefully because it matters. Most personal development is performed in isolation. You read the book, you apply the framework, you track the habit, you become a more optimized version of yourself in environments that you control. But the real test, the actual measure of who you're becoming, only exists in relationship, only in the space between you and another person, only in the moment where the framework meets the reality of someone else's pain or need or joy or fear, and you have to respond in real time, without rehearsal. That's where growth either happens or it doesn't. And I have failed that test. I want to say that plainly. I've been in moments where the right response was obvious, in retrospect, and invisible in real time, where I chose my ego over her need, where I let my certainty crowd out her experience, where I was technically right and emotionally absent simultaneously, which if you've ever been on the receiving end of that particular combination, you know is one of the lonelier places a person can be left standing. But here's what nobody told me about failing the test. Failing it consciously, failing it and knowing you failed it, sitting with that knowledge without immediately excusing it or explaining it away, is itself a form of growth. The willingness to be wrong without collapsing. The capacity to look at your own behavior with honesty rather than defensiveness. The ability to say, not to her, not yet, but to yourself first. I could have done that better. I will do it better. That is not weakness. That is the beginning of the kind of integrity that love actually requires. And love does require integrity. Not perfection. I've made peace with the fact that perfection isn't available to me. Not in this life, not in this form. But integrity. Consistency between what I say I value and what I actually do when the pressure is real and the audience is gone and no one is watching except her. She's always watching. Not in a surveillance sense, not in a way that makes me feel monitored or managed, in the way that someone who genuinely loves you watches, with hope, with attention, with the particular tenderness of someone who has decided to believe in you and is quietly, faithfully looking for evidence that the belief was justified. I don't want to be someone who disappoints that look. I'm not always successful, but I'm always trying. And the trying, the genuine, unglamorous, daily trying, is where real growth lives. Not in the breakthrough moments, not in the revelations, in the Tuesday morning decision to do the thing you said you'd do, in the small, consistent choices that accumulate into character, in the love that shows up, not because it feels effortless, but because it made a decision before the feeling arrived. Let me tell you something about psychological safety, because this is the part that quietly transformed everything for me. When someone feels genuinely safe with you, not just physically safe, but emotionally safe, safe enough to be uncertain, to be unfinished, to be in the middle of becoming something without having to present the completed version, they grow, rapidly, beautifully, in ways that surprise even them. Because most people are carrying around a version of themselves they've never fully expressed, because the environment never felt safe enough to risk it. She grew in my presence. I watched it happen. And I want to be honest, watching someone unfold in an environment you helped create is one of the most quietly profound experiences available to a human being. More profound than any achievement I've stood inside. Because achievements are about what you built. But this is about who you became together, and who you helped each other become. And that is a different category of meaning entirely. I grew because she required more of me. Not through demand, through deserving. She deserved more than the unexamined version of me. More than the automatic responses, and the comfortable habits, and the emotional shortcuts I'd been running on for years without anyone close enough to notice. She deserved the version of me that had actually done the work. That had sat in the discomfort. That had chosen the harder right thing over the easier familiar one. So I became that version, slowly, imperfectly, continuously. And I'm still becoming. That's the part I want you to carry with you, the understanding that growth in love is not a project with a completion date. It's not something you finish and then move on from. It's a living process, ongoing, responsive, alive to the moment, and to the person, and to the version of yourself that's still being shaped by both. She is still shaping me, and I am grateful, deeply, quietly, unperformatively grateful for every uncomfortable moment of that shaping, for every mirror she held up without knowing she was holding it, for every space she created where I could be unfinished without being abandoned. That gratitude isn't sentimental, it's structural, it's load-bearing. It's part of what keeps me standing. Meaning is not found. I want to start there, because I think we've been sold a version of life that treats meaning like a destination, like something waiting at the end of a long enough road, behind a big enough achievement, inside a quiet enough moment of solitude and reflection. Like if you just build enough, search enough, optimize enough, you'll arrive somewhere meaning lives, and you can finally rest inside it. I believed that once. I chased it with everything I had, and I arrived at impressive places, real places, places that looked exactly like what I'd been told to want. And meaning wasn't there. Not the kind I'm talking about. Not the kind that holds its shape in the dark. Not the kind that answers the question you're asking at 3 a.m, when the noise has stopped and it's just you, and the quiet and the truth of what your life actually is, beneath the performance of it. That kind of meaning, the load-bearing kind, I only found when I stopped looking for it and started building it. Not alone, with her. In the specific, daily, ordinary architecture of choosing someone and being chosen back. In the accumulated weight of 1,000 small moments that individually mean nothing and together mean everything. This is where I want to leave you. Not with a philosophy, not with a framework, with something true. I think about that warning often. The room, the voices, the pressure designed to make me small and recalculate and choose something safer than love. And I think about the stillness that moved through me, the quiet certainty, the total absence of internal debate. When I realized that what I was being asked to reconsider wasn't actually a choice for me. Not because I'm fearless, I've told you, I'm not. But because fear and love were both present in that room, and only one of them was pointing toward something real. Fear pointed toward preservation, toward the careful management of outcomes, toward the version of life that stays intact, by never risking anything that can't be replaced. And I understand that instinct. It's ancient. It kept us alive as a species. But it was never designed for this, for the question of who you are willing to be when being someone specific actually costs something. Love pointed toward her, and I followed love. Not blindly, I want you to hear that. With my eyes open, with full knowledge of what I was absorbing, with the conscious, deliberate, clear-eyed understanding that some things in life are worth the storm, that some flames are worth standing in front of, that some people are worth the kind of courage that has no audience and requires no applause and leaves no evidence except in the quality of what you build together afterward. Here's what courage for someone you love actually feels like from the inside. It doesn't feel heroic. I keep returning to this because I think it matters. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't swell with music or slow down for the camera. It feels like the most ordinary thing in the world, like breathing, like gravity, like the simple, quiet recognition that this is what you do, not because it's dramatic, but because it's right. Because somewhere in the deepest part of your own architecture, you made a decision about what kind of person you intended to be. And when the moment arrived that required that person, you simply became them. That's it. That's the whole thing. The gap between the person you perform for the world and the person you actually are in the moments nobody sees, that gap is where character lives. And character, in the end, is all you actually have. Not the results, not the reputation, not the version of yourself that gets to be impressive in rooms where impressing people matters. The private version. The one that acts the same whether or not anyone is watching. I want to be the man who acts the same whether or not anyone is watching. For her. Because of her. With the kind of loyalty that doesn't require conditions, or credit, or confirmation, that it's being noticed and appreciated. The kind of loyalty that is simply what it is. Solid, directional, unwavering, because that's what love looks like when it grows up. When it moves past the electricity and the newness and the performance and becomes something structural, something you can actually lean on. Look at me one more time. I'm not telling you this so you'll think something specific about me. I'm telling you this because I believe, with the full weight of everything I've lived and felt and survived and chosen, that the most important decisions you will ever make won't be made in boardrooms or on stages or in moments that history records. They'll be made in quiet rooms with real pressure and no audience. They'll be made in the split second between fear and love, when both are present and only one gets to lead. And the one you choose in that moment reveals everything. Everything you've told yourself about your values. Everything you've said about what matters. Everything you've claimed about who you are when it counts. All of it either confirms itself or exposes itself in that one unremarkable, utterly consequential moment of private choice. I've made mine. I keep making it. Every day. Every room. Every moment where the storm shows up looking for the candle and finds me standing in between instead. She doesn't need me to be perfect. I've let go of that particular fantasy entirely. She doesn't need me to be fearless or flawless or immune to the pressure that comes for every person.